Welcome to the Startup Huddle. I'm your host, Jozef Maruscak, and I'm excited to introduce you to the current and upcoming leaders of the startup tech world. We'll discuss digital products and key takeaways for life and professional growth. So grab a coffee and let's huddle up. Okay, so hello everyone. I would like to welcome Vitaly Gordon here, our first ever guest in the Startup Huddle podcast. We have known Vitaly for quite some time. Vitaly is the CEO of Faros.ai, also the founder. And he's also a client of ours, of Sudolabs, so we've have sort of kind of a working relationship. Today, I would like to discuss more about the product. I would like to also deep dive maybe into Vitaly's personal experience from being a founder, being the CEO, and being in the tech space and in the Silicon Valley for quite some time. So maybe, hi Vitaly. I'm very happy that you came here tonight.
Well, thanks for having me, Joseph.
Perfect. So let's maybe start a little bit with your background. So where you're coming from, where did you work before founding Faros, and tell us maybe a little bit more about how did you come up with the idea in the first place?
Yeah, so kind of depends on how much you want to go back. I grew up in Israel where I did the whole army thing that many Israelis do, and was a part of a special unit that accounts for, I think, like 50% of the Israeli startup founders. So that was very much kind of expected of you to go on the path. However, I did a couple of jobs in large, mostly public companies. I was a data scientist at LinkedIn, and then spent 5 years as a VP of engineering at Salesforce, which for the listeners who don't know is a very large American company that sells CRM software. And in my journey at Salesforce, I stumbled upon just how well a company that is so successful runs functions like sales, marketing, finance, customer success. Everything was extremely optimized, extremely metrics driven, and it was, like a fine kind of Swiss clock. But if you look at engineering, engineering being kind of a more nascent function is not at all data driven. There is actually very little data that is being used besides like, okay, is this ticket open and closed? That's, the level of kind of sophistication that we look for. And I thought that this is a big problem because if you think about most engineers, they are very highly technical people. So it's not a skills gap that they are lacking. And it's not like they cannot be analytical. It must be something else. And so I kind of studied this problem, and what we realized is basically a problem with access to data. And we decided to solve this problem first within Salesforce by building a solution that takes data from all of the engineering systems. Think about the Jiras, the GitHubs, the CI, CD, incident management system, bring them into one place, and then really use that data in order to determine how efficiently the engineering organization run, where are the bottlenecks, and things like that. And that's what eventually led me to start Faros. And by offering this solution not just within Salesforce and to Salesforce teams, but also to other companies as well.
And so, how much does your previous experience actually contribute to founding Faros? Was it that you were thinking about, well, if sales is data driven, then so should engineering be, or what was the process there?
Well, it started from just when you're at a large company and you kind of oversee, let's say, a business unit, there are a lot of expectations, right? I think Salesforce, I think they're ending their fiscal year in 5 days or something like that, and we'll be doing like $30 billion of ARR this year. So it's a massive company. So every single kind of business matters, and you constantly get questioned about how you operate, whether you're efficient or not, and things like that. And what I felt as a VP of engineering, I don't have good answers, compared to my peers in sales and marketing and all that. They have much better answers, and I want to be just as informed about my function as they are informed about theirs. So that is kind of what, led to it. It's just the ability to understand if if I kind of run a function, I want to know everything about it and be able to communicate that information And so that is what kind of started the journey of me exploring, what kind of solutions might help me solve that problem.
And so how does Faros AI solves that problem exactly?
So what we do, and like I mentioned, there's kind of multiple ways on kind of solving this problem. I think the most important thing is to just understand what the problem really is. Like, what do we mean? About being more data driven, and what is lacking for being data driven? Because obviously, the idea of making engineering data driven is not a novel idea. Like, people were thinking about it for quite some time. But however, you probably cannot name a single company that made really a big change in this process. Like, there is no the Salesforce of engineering efficiency, or Workday or ServiceNow, that those companies that they exist for other functions. And the reason is because it's actually hard, because if you look at how companies develop their software, and I think you folks at Sudo have a very good visibility into it, every company's tech stack is extremely unique, right? It's almost like a unique fingerprint. It's a unique snowflake that you have to do it. So you have to really be able to connect all of the system and really kind of extract all of the data, because the reason why we use so many tools, it's great for our productivity and our ability to build things quickly, but it's actually pretty bad for abilities of managers and leaders to understand what is going on, because all of the data is across dozens of different tools. So what we do is we take all the data from all these tools and really understand what is the development process. Because if you think about manufacturing, software development is not that different. Think about, you have a plant and there's station in there, there is the product, the design, the engineering, the quality, the deployment, the DevOps part, and you go through all of that. And with manufacturing, every single station in a plant will get measured, and you will look, where are the bottlenecks? Do I have enough quality people? And maybe if things get stuck in quality, adding more engineers to develop more features actually does not make things faster. It actually makes things slower. And this is kind of some of the insights that we show to our customers, where are the bottlenecks in their in their process and how they can solve it.
You also claim that some part of your product is based on, AI. What exactly are those AI parts there, and how does AI help you in sort of achieving that visibility and flagging those maybe key bottlenecks in the engineering process?
Yeah, so there are a couple of parts that kind of AI is needed in the process. One of them is just to arrange all data. So I'll give you just a very simple example. When you use GitHub at a company, a lot of people are using their own personal GitHub handles, right? And they bring those handles that they're used for a previous company, and suddenly it appears. So how do you even know who is, I don't know, sudo 123, right? It's probably a person, developer, and let's say they have that GitHub handle. You need to figure out who's actually doing that work. Now, that is just one part of, let's say, kind of this identity resolution of understanding who does. And, people have different identities, different systems, so you need to connect. In other things is also, let's say, if you now use a system like Jira, which then, is connected to then a pull request in GitHub, how do you even know that this ticket is what led to this code being written, right? It's kind of how do you attach, and then how do you know that actually, the code is then what became this artifact that then got deployed to this environment. So you need to kind of connect all the dots across all these systems that were not built to talk to each other, right? All those systems were built to do the thing that they do. And so in order for you to kind of understand how all the things connect to each other, it's a hard problem where, can be solved using, data and machine learning. So that's one part. And the other part is also think about, now that you have a lot of data that was connected, then how do you actually know what to look for, or how do you even get to your answers as quickly as possible? And this is actually one of the things that we now see, all of the advances that are made with technologies like ChatGPT, right, where we also integrating into our product, is why would I go and click and use a BI tool when I can just ask a question of where are my developers spending their time? Like, what is the biggest bottleneck? Like, if you can ask those questions in kind of a natural language, that would be and far better interface as opposed to, the interfaces that we're used to today.
So for me and also for the listeners to maybe better imagine exactly the impact of using your platform maybe on the business. So can you walk me through sort of a typical client example? So what are normally the problems they have? How do they benefit from using the Faros AI? Maybe some direct sort of impact on the business that you can create for them or help them with.
Yeah. So think about it this way. So engineering today for a lot of companies is the number one cost kind of budget line in terms of just how much. Like I think now, modern companies have about 25% of what our kind of headcount is engineering, and let's say it's actually comes closer to like 35-40% in terms of actual spend in dollars. So every single thing you can do in order to improve this function is actually directly affects your bottom line. But more specifically, let's use the example I gave you before. What engineering teams and I think don't understand that their business is not to write code. Their business is eventually to affect customer outcomes. So in many companies that we work with, and mostly kind of larger companies, if you look at the process there, those companies believe that their job is done when the code is written. But that is not true, because if the code is not being used by the customer, then it's useless. It's as if it never existed. It's like if it never makes to production. So what we see is, with companies, is there is a lot of code being written, but this code never makes it to production. And now the question, is why? Because that is what you're paying engineers to do. Eventually, like you need that code to production, because like I said, otherwise, the fact that it says in GitHub somewhere does not help you as, let's say a CEO of a company. So now, if let's say you build features, but most of them, it takes like, like first of all, like only, 70 or 80% of them get to production. And then when they do get to production, it takes like 2 months. If you look at the over velocity, that is just you're spending a lot of money on things that, never get anywhere. Right. So the pace of innovation is really important for you to be competitive. And so what we help companies to figure out is, like I said, how can you get more code to more customers, faster? And in some cases, we show that, like, there is even a metric that's called lead time to production. So like it's lead time, how long from an engineer finish writing code until that's going to production. And what we show them by, removing some bottlenecks, they can improve it by, orders of magnitude. Like, for example, from releasing code, once every couple of weeks to like multiple times a day, right? And that efficiency, it has like an exponential benefit on your ability to compete in the market.
That definitely sounds like a great benefit for the clients on in various respects. So when I'm thinking about it, then who is your target customer? Are you selling to larger organizations, or are you also targeting maybe earlier stage startup? I guess that the more complexity, the more engineers involved, the better you can perform.
Yeah, so it's definitely very much aligned with complexity, because if you think about it, usually the problems start where you start having multiple functions that are not really, talking to each other, right? If you have like just a team of engineers and everyone, talks to each other and everyone knows what's going on, then usually like you'll be fine. The problem is when you start having like an engineering team or multiple engineering team. You have like the front end team and the back end team and the platform team, and then you have like the DevOps team and like the QA team and like a security team, and all of them are just like these, centrally managed teams that don't really talk to each other, and things just not like where, most of the inefficiency happens is between kind of the transition between kind of those functions, and, things kind of, in some cases it's, lack of communication. In some cases, like the teams are not maybe even funded properly, right? Like there's just a bottleneck, like let's say, for kind of security conscious companies, in a lot of cases, what you see is just, the security team just cannot go through all the features, right? It's just, and what And usually if you look at the engineering leaders, what they do is they say, oh, we don't have enough things are not moving fast enough, so let's hire more engineers. So they actually, but if you don't solve the bottleneck, right, it's actually like I said, it's counterproductive. And you're actually, now you have the saying that you probably heard CEOs saying, like, how come we have like double the engineers now, but we're moving twice as slow, right? And this is why, because if you haven't solved your bottleneck, then it's kind of, it doesn't matter where you hired additional resources.
Got it. So could you maybe also share some clients' names if it's not confidential? What would be your target client, the persona you are trying to sell to?
Yeah, so our main kind of, like I said, our main customers are large kind of public companies like when her, about Box, Coursera is another one, Astronomer, which is the company behind kind of Apache Airflow, and kind of multiple others, but it's usually companies with, hundreds or thousands of engineers.
Perfect. Thanks for clarifying this. Well, you also had a quite eventful, I would say, not necessarily eventful, but a successful, I would say, fundraising journey. So, could you tell us a little bit more about how much money you raised, from whom, and how did you go about the process?
Yeah, so we raised our seed about, let's say, 3 years ago, and then we raised our, let's say, about a year ago. So those are kind of the main. We had a couple of those in between. So that is so roughly that is our kind of funding history.
Who are your investors, maybe in the A round?
So actually, our investors in our A round are kind of, interesting enough. We had a kind of somewhat different journey. Is the same investor that kind of the seed. We in some cases, when kind of things make sense, and that was the case with us. Actually, we had multiple investors in our seed, and one of the problems when you have multiple investors that each of them gets a smaller share, right, of the company. So they all kind of wanted to double down and kind of own more of the company. And so we actually did an insider round with those investors. And those investors, by the way, are Signalfire, Salesforce Ventures, and Global Founders Capital, which is a European firm. And also we have a group that's called the Operator Collective as another investor that actually joined just in the A round.
Perfect. Like some great names there on your cap table. There might be quite a lot of early stage founders listening to us right now. So when you were raising for the first time, and I guess that it was right after you exited Salesforce, right? How did you go about it? And if you could maybe tell us a little bit how you feel the situation changing over time. So in the current fundraising climate, there's a lot of founders who are struggling to raise money. We know that 1 or 2 years ago, the situation was exactly the opposite. So people were raising at crazy valuations for products, essentially for ideas. Maybe to summarize, my first question would be, how did you go about your first fundraise? And then the second question would be, do you see the sort of pre-seed rounds climate changing right now?
So we raise our seed round kind of, again, pretty much we had an idea deck. We had a good team of kind of three co-founders that all spend a lot of time in the industry. So we were able to kind of raise on that, because I think most kind of seed or pre-seed investors know that whatever your idea is, it will probably change 5 times in the first year kind of the company. You will kind of understand it more. So really they try to focus on the team and whether the team is successful in kind of will be successful in making things happen. So this is also kind of one advice that I would give to kind of younger and kind of founders that just start their career, especially at the pre-seed stage. like what matters mostly is your team, and like why do you think that team will win. Like for in my example is like, hey, I was a VP engineering at a large company, and I'm working on a product for VPs, a VP of engineers, and in large companies, right? So it was the kind of founder market fit was pretty clear there, and you tie it with the kind of history of prior success. And I think those are the things that are not emphasized enough in kind of the pitches of like not so much why your idea is great, of like why are you the right person to pursue this idea, and that is where you probably need to spend most of your time. And obviously, one of the things that was helpful for our team to raise is, like I said, the history of the team and our connection to Valley, and that the fact that people knew us and all that. The less you have of that, the more you need some other proof points. So those proof points might be already some customers, some sort of people paying you. Like at the end of the day, I think this is where founders misunderstand what business venture capitalists are in. They're in the business of reducing risk. Like the more risk you have, the more it affects kind of the valuation. So the way to think about the a bill and say a $10 million, let's say, valuation is really, it's kind of VCs look at you as like you probably are $1 billion company, but there's like a 99.9% that you will fail, right? And then if you kind of apply those numbers, I'm sorry, 99 in this case, 99% you will fail. And if you apply those percentages, that will give you a $10 million valuation. Let's say you now have 3 customers that are paying you. Now it reduces to 95%, that you were going to fail. And now that raises your valuation to 50 million, right? It's really about not that you can create value, you actually remove risk. And the more risk can be removed, like for example, if you have founders that know what they're doing, if you have customers who want to, if you have employees that all want to join you, right? So all of these things are removing risk, and this is kind of what you should focus on. On the other side, you asked me about like what the market is today. So there are kind of good news and bad news. Like actually, most of the bad news are for later stage founders, where the valuation were crazy, and where people were getting paid at very high multiples because we lived in an environment with kind of 0% interest rates, and there was just nothing else to do with the money. So you might as well kind of try to invest it in startups. However, if you look at like on the supply of demand of capital, it's not that the supply went away. Like still all of these VCs raised funds. And so there was actually still all of that money is still in the system. But now that money needs to be funneled somewhere. So of course, some VCs just decided to, slow things down a little bit. So there is less money invested. But I think actually, if you look at the seed and pre-seed market, a lot of even later stage firms start to move because they don't want to invest in any kind of late stage company because the valuations don't make sense there, at the very least until the founders kind of agree to change their valuation. So now there is arguably more money in for earlier stage companies than there was before the market correction. So if you look at how prices settle is a function of supply and demand. So I would argue that actually now there is even more supply of capital for early stage company than there was before kind of the market correction.
Very interesting. So I might have 2 follow-up questions there. One, what are now then the later stage companies doing? Are they going for down rounds, or are they trying to essentially survive the current situation and try to be profitable, cutting their costs? So what exactly should be the strategy for later stage companies right now, or maybe what is the strategy for later stage right now?
So look, as unpleasant as it to say it, the reality is that there are very few companies that died in the last couple of years. There are, if you look at, the startup business is supposed to be risky, right? There's only a few companies that succeed at this, but it seemed like everyone was succeeding, even companies that didn't really have business models, didn't really have, paying customers, still somehow managed to survive. And I think this is kind of the cleanup that we need to do for our industry. Is it's not so much, I think, about valuations being, lower or higher. Not every company is meant to be at least a venture-backed company, right? Is actually, if you look at it, I think less than 1% of the companies in the world are backed by venture capital. So it's a very specific route that is um, not the right route for every single company. However, many companies still didn't realize and went through that route, and because there was so much money in the system to kind of to help with that, many companies got funded. So I think that this is where a lot of founders really kind of need to look themselves in the mirror and ask themselves, am I really kind of venture back? So what do I mean? Like, how possible is it that you will get to an outcome that is a public company? Because that is what at least the large scale VCs are looking for, right? They're looking for, let's say, $1 billion outcome. There's very, very, very few $1 billion companies, right? That's just the reality. It's extremely hard. And let's say with the Colin multipliers, you need to get to like $100 million ARR. Like, let's look, what does it take? If you're, let's say, at $1 million and you need to get for, 100 million, right? You need to like triple your revenue, or double it every year. And then within like 5 to 7 year window, you will get from 1 to 100. And that is extremely, extremely hard. Like, the best companies in the world now, like, the Salesforce or Microsoft or something like that, grow like at 25%. But they grow off a much, much larger base, right? So if you're like a $1 million ARR company and you grow at a 25%, like, just do the math and it will take you, I don't know how much, like, I know, like, 30 years to get to like 100 million. That's just not what the model is optimized for. And kind of, so you need to kind of ask yourself, what is the right model for me? Because if that is your growth trajectory, you just can't hit the goals that the VCs are looking for. And basically, it's not. So my point is, it's not just about valuations. It's really about, there are some companies that this model is good for, and there are some companies that this model is just not good for.
So you think that either some of the companies or quite a few of the companies will die, or the other ones that are not necessarily built for the VC business model, they will try to become more stable with less growth and like ideally cash flow positive.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is what I hate about the analogy of a runway. And people say, oh, extend your runway. The point of a runway for planes is not to have the plane circle the airport for as long as possible. The point is to take off, right? Like, so the point is, like, yes, you should extend your runway if there is a possibility for you to ever take off. But if your plane is too heavy to ever take off, it doesn't matter what the runway is, right? Like, that's what I think, what is kind of bad about this analogy, that you have to take off. So if, let's say, you now cut your burn, but you now like reduce your, ARR growth by so much that you will just, there is absolutely no possibility for you to become like a public company one day, then it just doesn't help. So you're right. Like, you should start thinking about, how do I, become profitable, and how do I run a business without any, VC capital? There are other sources of capital. There is debt. There is other, but like, it's just like, not every company needs to be, there is nothing wrong about not being backed by venture capitalists.
Perfect. Now, so coming back to the early stage founders, you said that you're under an impression that that there actually might be more capital available for early stage founders. Now, still though, it is at least from the time that I spent in the Silicon Valley, and that was quite a few months in the past year. There are these rumors spread that it's a lot harder to fundraise. There might be rumors that those might be true. So do you think it is actually harder to fundraise for early stage startups? Essentially, the key difference that people are talking about is the fact that now you need to have an MVP, or you need to have some traction to raise funds. But it sounds counterintuitive given that there might be actually more money available for early stage founders. So how would you explain that?
Yeah. So look, I think we're now in this kind of game of chicken, and if your kind of European listeners don't know what it is when two cars are racing towards each other and to see which one kind of turns their wheel first in order to avoid collision, right? That's kind of and between VCs and founders, because here's the reality. If VCs are sitting in money, VCs are charging a lot of money to manage that money. And so they need to spend it. Like they're not a checking account, right? Like they are given money to spend. And by the way, they're given money to spend not to try to do, as well as the rest of the market. Because if you think about how VCs themselves get funded, they're like pension funds, and those pension funds already have 95% of their, money in bonds or in, public stocks or something like that. Like the VC is about actually, trying to get outside returns that are not, very correlated with the rest of the market. So like VCs need to take risk, and that's why these foundations are paying them for. So VCs also will need to feel the pressure, because if you're sitting on a pile of cash, you need at some point to start investing it, especially if you think about raising your next fund. Like in order for you to raise your next fund, you need to show some history of like, oh, we invested in all these companies and these companies are successful, and then they got their next investment. So you see, Mr. LP, like, I'm a good VC, give me more money. So if you just wait on the sidelines, because again, like I said, it's not that unless there is a major change in the supply of startups, there is let's assume for a second, there is a fixed supply of startups and there is a fixed supply of money, right? And so unless many VCs, return their money, the money they, kind of collected from their investors, they will have to spend that money. So now the only reason is like, who will blink first? Is it the VCs that will realize, oh shit, we're running out of time and we don't have any company we invested in, right? And we need to start investing more. Or it's founders that, will need to say like, oh, I need more money, I'm closing the company, so I'll accept the deal. I will say even more. Most VCs actually don't want to invest in struggling company. Like if, you were a company that is about to shut down and you're desperate and you'll take any money, that's not what VCs like. They want the companies, right, that have very bright future in front of them. Like no one wants to come, because like even if you do down rounds, like it's so much issues with morale of employees, and employees were already thinking, oh my God, my equity is worth that much. And like, I was buying a house with that equity, or, whatever it is. And now suddenly you're coming and, their equity slash in half. So no VC really wants to deal with that. They rather work with like happy companies and happy founders. And still the supply of these companies is not that great. So I said, yes, VCs can sit. And there definitely is a period, which is probably now, where founders find that it's, harder to raise, because VCs just, kind of keep telling themselves, like, I have an infinite time, I can sit, I can sit. But at some point, let's say if you raise money as a VC and you said, I would deploy this money within 3 years, right? And there is 1 year passed, and then the second year passed, like you will see, oh, you will start hurrying. So I think that now we are in this artificial place that it might be harder to raise money. But at some point, I think the, the gates will open, and and there will be a flooding, especially if also, like I said, later stage firms that we see are doing more and more early stage deals, because they want to deploy that capital. So yes, it might be, but my guess it would be, especially for early stage company, it will be temporary.
Great. So those are some, I think, great news for most of the early stage founders. We'll see how this develops. Now, let's try to maybe focus a little bit more about your experience as a founder and as a CEO. So you started as, in LinkedIn, then Salesforce, working in large corporations. Then at some point you got the idea and you started your own company. Now, why did you start your own company, your own business, and what you like about being the CEO and the founder?
Well, the best thing about starting your own company is you can build it the way you want. You are kind of, the master of your destiny, so you can do whatever you think is right. There are pros and cons about that, and I think there is also not all people, the same way that not all companies are meant to be venture-backed companies, not all people meant to be founders, but for the people who have that in their blood, I think it's a very compelling proposition. You can build and shape a company into what you want it to become.
So what is it exactly you think that founders should have as the skill set or character?
Um, it's a good question. I don't think there's like a one type of founder, but I think at the end of the day, I think every single founder needs to understand that this job is a very humbling job. Like you will have to, beg, borrow, and steal like every day. Like basically being a founder, it's a sales job. And if you don't like sales, you're probably not going to be great at it. And you constantly sell. You sell to investors, you sell to employees, you sell to customers, you sell to, kind of PR and journalists. Like you just constantly need to sell, sell, sell. And it's most of the days are, pretty bad. And there is just nothing that, nothing works. And, it goes. And then, you close a deal and then, everyone's happy, right? There is it's a very also not so much up and down kind of days like you might experience if you, let's say you're an engineer. It's like down, 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 down. And then, there's like one up and hopefully that it will be worth it. So my advice is you should only become, a founder of a startup when you cannot not become one. Like if there is absolutely there's nothing you can do to stop yourself, that is probably the right time. But like I would highly, highly advise people against it if they think it's like a way to get rich quickly or something like that. It's actually probably one of the worst ways to get rich.
Yeah, it's highly improbable, and in very certain professions, and in quite a lot of professions, especially in the Silicon Valley, I think you can more probably earn enough wealth, to become financially independent, etc., than by running a startup.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of I guess that from your experience as a founder, you want to do it because you can shape the company, you can build the company the way you want it. You want to build it. Are there any other particular reasons why you like being a founder and the CEO?
Well, one also thing that we should talk about, it's easier for me to be a founder than to many other people. It's just like, look, VC is not, or, venture-backed startups is not a fair game. It's not meant to be. So like, let's say, think about it this way. One is it was much, much easier for me to become a founder because I am kind of I already had connections and I had the experience in the industry, and I worked for, let's say, I remember like 20 years or almost before starting a company. The second thing, it was much easier for me to hire employees and engineers. I managed 150 engineers, and many of them now like work with us at the new company. It was easier for me to also close customer because of my job I happen to know a lot of VPs of engineering, right? So that is another thing. So and still for me it's really hard, and there is obviously if you're, let's say, if Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk want to start now a new company, it will be way easier for them than it is for me, right? So so there are levels to it, and I think this is one of the things that I would advise founders to just be aware of, that when like when you go to the market and when you compete, there might be some like Jeff Bezos that is competing against you, right? And you need to and you need to compete with them. There are no like in, let's say, video games, there is no like kind of power ups that you will get for being new to it, right? It's like it will be very, very hard. So that is just something to kind of keep in mind if you decide to do this.
Got it. Now, So the way how you describe being a founder is quite interesting in a way that you really see the tough part of that journey. Now, if you could maybe say like what were the toughest times on the current Faros journey?
Look, everything's hard because you have to do everything yourself. Like there is no kind of structure that helps you. Like everything from legal and finance and security and like all of that, and office spaces. Like you just have to do it. It This is another thing that I think many people don't realize just how weird our industry is. Because if we compare it to Hollywood, let's say you're a great director, you're like Steven Spielberg, right? If you want to do a movie, you don't go and start, a movie studio and hire, and start doing the finance. You go to an existing studio, right? And you ask them for help with production, with everything else. You say, I just want to be a director. I'm a really, really good director. But now take that analogy to, Star World is, let's say you're an amazing product person, right? And you just want to build product. But it's not like you have to now first, like, be small lawyer, and like you need to incorporate the company. You need to figure out what are your company bylaws, how to like distribute equity. Then you need to like financially, you need to understand how venture capital works, how like different terms and condition, how to like sell the movie. Like all of that is kind of crazy. Just the amount of responsibility that we put kind of on founders. So this is just like from the entire model is, I think, just crazy when you think about it. But, to make things worse is the reality is most startups will fail, right? And you as a founder will need to also constantly believe that, well, everything's right. And like when you know that things are not great and there are problems, and every single, even the most successful companies go through times where things are difficult and hard, but and especially if you're the CEO of the company, there is no one you can complain to, because like you have to always project that everything is great, because like with the second that you start projecting that things are falling apart, things will kind of fall apart. So it's a tough mental situation to be in for most people.
And so how do you keep with all that pressure and the mental burden that you have? What keeps you going despite all the drawbacks that you see in your job?
Yeah, so I think there are different ways for different people to go about it. For me personally, is I just enjoyed so much. So I'm saying, look, at the end of the day, even if there's nothing works out, like this is, the best time I had in my career. And even if it doesn't work out financially for me, I'm fine with that, because, like I just don't need that much money in my life. So, I rather spend the precious time I have on this planet on like doing the things I like, right? So that is just one thing. You can also celebrate the victories. Like for example, one of the values we have in our company is stop and smell the roses. Like you need to celebrate the wins. You need to celebrate, and you need to surround yourself with people that you enjoy working with. I'm saying it's being a startup founder is just so hard. Doing it with people you don't enjoy working with is just it just will only make it harder. And I think this is where a lot of the companies fail. Like for example, there's so much written on the internet about like relationship with VCs and kind of all of that, and how to select investor. Like most startups who don't fail because the VC and the founder don't get along is because two founders don't get along. That is like by far, there are far more many cases where founder disagreement leads to the company exploding, rather than like some VC came and fired some CEO. That is actually very rare occurrence that happens. But again, so probably one of the things, the best thing I did is I started my company with two individuals that I've known for like 10 years before starting this company. So things are just easier this way.
Yes, that was actually my next question. How did you choose your co-founders? It seems to be that you are able to keep up with everything. especially thanks to the co-founders and thanks to the great team that you have. Now, do you think that all the startups should have various co-founders, several co-founders, I mean, or is it okay? Do you think for a company to be essentially started by one co-founder that will go on the market by himself or herself?
So I would start in saying again, if you're early in your career and you're early in your journey, probably have more co-founders because it's like I said, it's just easier, right? You don't want to make things harder for yourself. Having said that, actually, I don't believe this like Silicon Valley trope that you like every company has to have multiple co-founders and they all need to be equal and kind of all of that, because I think that is mostly a way that again VCs are reducing risk. They say, hey, if we pay some amount for a company, we might as well pay for like 2 or 3 people rather than one, right? Because just for them, they believe that this reduces risk. So so again, I don't think it's something that you have to do. But my advice would be that if you start a company for the first time and you don't really know what you're doing, is better to have other people to talk to through that journey and kind of decide yourself and not carry all the burden yourself. And then who knows, maybe leave the being a solo founder for your second or third company, right? So it's so I don't think it's mandatory, but I think it just makes things easier.
Yes, and but you had the chance to, and you're fortunate enough maybe to have the co-founders available at the right moment, right? And that also you knew the co-founders, you knew that probably your collaboration will look very well and will go smoothly. What about the founders that are just starting? They are very early in the process, maybe at the start of their careers. How would you suggest they should find the co-founders? I think it's a very that's a very important question. And again, a lot will depend on how well they work together. So how would you go about it?
So it's also a great question. Like I said, there are many people who just want to do a startup, and especially I think that one of the things I'm seeing a lot, and I'm not a big fan of, are just founders with absolutely no experience in anything really going and starting a company. And then there even, it's one thing if you want to start some, no new social networks for, teenagers, which is something that obviously, someone who's like in their early 20s can do. But if you then go and start like an enterprise database company, then that's just kind of wrong in many ways. My advice is the same. It's not just about how you find co-founders. Like, I think that before you go and decide to dedicate the next 10 years of your life to a company, you should try to answer a few questions first. Like, one is, how will I find people to come work with me? Like, I don't have industry experience. I don't know anyone. Like, why would they come work for me, right? That is like, for me, the answer was pretty clear. Like I said, I already had a lot of people that already work for me, so it's like easier to continue work with me on my new company. So that was one. The second is like, how will you find customers, right? Like, who do you know anyone who's gonna buy it? And then maybe you build again some consumer product or product-led growth kind of motion. But even then, you need to think about like, okay, do I have a strategy around it? So I think like a lot of founders, and look, I'm not against it because I understand where it's coming from, but I'm just saying, like, if you really wanna take it seriously, it's actually better. And one of the advice is like, how do you find co-founders? Is actually a lot of co-founders met when they work together for a larger company. So there's nothing wrong like with if you go and spend some time at a larger company and work with other folks, and then decide to start a company together based on the idea that you discovered while working at that company, right? So that's actually a good way. But if you try to force it, if you start your kind of journey by saying like, okay, the first thing I decided is I want to start a company, and now let's go get an idea, let's go get a team, let's go get customer, let's go get, it's just going to be very, very hard. And it will just, the odds are so much against you. It's much, much better where you come naturally, like I said, like for us, the idea came naturally, the team came naturally. Like it's just we were all at the right place at the at the same time, at the same place, and we just left. And like I said, even that is still very very hard. But I just think it will be much harder if you have to come up with everything from scratch.
Amazing. That makes a lot of sense. So maybe this brings me to the last question. You have quite a lot of experience working with larger companies. Also, the journey of Faros is already quite long. Now you have a quite large team as well. So maybe since you became a founder, are there any key takeaways that you learned from your journey as the CEO or as the founder? Something that you definitely didn't know before founding the company, and something that you think would be useful to share?
Wow.
Very
Let me
open-ended question.
tell you,
Yeah.
tell you this. Like, if you haven't learned anything, then like you probably are doing something wrong, right? Like I learned quite a lot, but I think maybe a different way to ask the question is one of the things that I notice at second-time founders versus like first-time founders. Like probably the biggest takeaway that I see from friends of mine that started their second company is kind of similar to what I was describing in the previous question. Is they start with first kind of working from the problem kind of backwards. Is I think most first-time founders are focused on the product, and most second-time founders are focused on the go-to-market strategy. And they first figure out like who do I want to help, and then what are their problems, and then they kind of build a solution to fit that, as opposed to like I have this wonderful idea and I just need to build it. And I think that is a much healthier approach. In one conversation about with a VC, a very very famous VC that I spoke to, he told me this out. He said every single time a founder comes to me, he tells me about the ship that they built, and what it's made from, and how many kind of cells it has, and blah 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 blah. So what I want to know is where the wind is blowing, right? Because if the wind is blowing in kind of your direction, then it doesn't really matter what ship you build. Like you will probably go pretty far, right? But if the wind is blowing against you, then again, it doesn't matter what ship you build. And I think that is the kind of maybe a message to live you with, is just focus more on what the wind is, as opposed to like what kind of ship you want to build.
Perfect. So I think that brings us to the end. Thank you very much, Vitaly, for coming. Thank you for a very pleasant conversation. Hopefully, this will help a lot of founders. Hopefully, also quite a few VP of engineering people would like to try out Faros. So thanks again for your time, and speak soon.
Hey, thank you very much, Joseph, for having me.
And that's it for today's episode of the Startup Huddle. Thank you very much for listening, and make sure to catch all episodes on the startuphuddle.com and follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter for more insights and updates on the world of startups. Thanks again for tuning in.